Hi, welcome to this week's episode of the Wellbeing Show. I've got a guest joining us from California, very early in the morning for her, poor thing, because it's not so late in the day, but I think it's about 7:30 or something like that in the morning. So very dedicated to come and talk about her book, which I'm really interested in hearing more about. Quincy is joining us from Los Angeles, and I'm very grateful to have her here. But just as I usually do, remember this is a pre-recorded show. So if you want to send messages, that's great. Send them to my number 07506 319 745. Send them on WhatsApp or +44 7506 319 745 if you're outside the UK. And I can pass on messages to Quincy, but please don't call because when it goes out, it's recorded. So I might be doing something else. You might not get a happy Noel if you get me in the middle of a meal or something like that. But anyway, lovely to have you all here. Hi, Quincy. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. Yeah. And we've all woken up on a strange day with a
Yeah,
sort of rerun of some
definitely.
weirdness. That's just better. It does. But you're in the People's Republic of California, so you're probably going to be relatively protected from some of the stuff that we know is likely to happen.
Yes, for sure. I'm very grateful to live here.
Quite, I'm sure. I'm sure. California is one of my favorite places, actually. I've been there lots. So,
Oh, really? Where's
yeah.
your favorite place in California?
Um, well, the north is more I like the north, NorCal. I like Big Sur
Mhm.
and San
Mhm.
Francisco and Yosemite. Um,
Yeah.
so those types of areas, because I'm sort of more of a country person than a city person. Although I live in the city, I live in London. How about you? Have you were you born in Los
I was
Angeles?
born in Southern California, so I've kind of been here, but I've been all around California.
So when you say southern, do you mean San Diego or do you mean Los Angeles or
Los Angeles, but my parents were born in like San Diego, so we're kind of all from here.
yeah. So there's a little bit of a competition between SoCal and NorCal, isn't there? So
A little bit, yeah.
for you, SoCal is the place to be, right?
Oh, definitely. Some great beaches. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, you've got a place like Malibu, which I really like. It's really good.
Yeah,
And San Diego is, I mean, I have to say, San Diego surprised me how beautiful it is. It was
for sure. All those coastal towns are just
They're great,
gorgeous.
aren't they? And just south of Los Angeles, you've got some really nice, very high-end coastal towns, which are very beautiful.
Yeah.
I stayed at very expensive as well, but very pleasant. So you grew up in Los Angeles?
Yeah, I was born here, grew up here. Don't know much else. I love it here.
Is it
I
just
think
you? Do you have sisters and
I
brothers?
have a sister. She's in college right now. She's actually in Paris for a study abroad program, so she's pretty far away.
Great.
But yeah, no,
Yeah.
she's kind of a big part of my life for sure.
What's she studying?
She's studying business right now.
Right. And you're in, you say high school?
I'm still in high school. I'm in my last year of high school, so I'm kind of looking at all the colleges right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you
Big
plan
part
to
of high
do?
school.
What's your field that you'd like to go and study in college?
Probably psychology. I
Is
think
it?
that
Okay.
it's been a big part of my life, and I think I would love to kind of dive deeper
Yeah.
into the
Yeah.
educational side of that field.
Yeah. Are your parents in that side of thing, or are they in the arts? And
My parents are both in advertising, so
oh,
definitely not.
right.
I mean, I guess there's some psychology within there, but
Yeah.
no,
Well,
more of a
oddly
creative.
enough, modern marketing or advertising started with Freud, strangely enough. So
Yeah.
the early people and pioneers in that field went and consulted with Freud on learning how to manipulate people's feelings. So, and Freud said what he always
Yeah.
says. It's all about sex. I went, oh, okay, all right. So, but it's actually more about fear, I think. Most
Oh,
marketing
definitely.
people will tell you if they can trigger fear, then you've got somebody's attention more than anything else. So you're interested in psychology. When did that interest start, do you think?
I think, I mean, I can tell you a little bit about my story.
Oh, do, please.
I have had anxiety for as long as I can remember. I mean, and as long as my parents can remember. In preschool, there was just me not wanting to go to play dates. There was all of that. Um, so I mean, that was just has been a big part of my life. And then in around,
Was it
I think
sparked by something, or it's just something that's always been there, sort of?
I just think that's how my brain is wired. I think it's just wired a little differently.
Okay.
Um, and around like 13, 14, my parents got me into therapy because I think they recognized that I didn't have to live this way. I didn't have to live with that level of anxiety that I was at.
Mhm.
And it truly changed my life. I was like able to go from the confines of my house to the entire world, and it just really opened up my scope on life because I was able to do so many things I wasn't able to before. Um,
How did you
and
manage
so
school, Quincy, with such high levels of anxiety? Because 13 is, I mean, you're getting on there. So that's 13. You would have been in school for like,
long time.
yeah, did no, 9 years, 8 years, 8 or 9 years by then.
I think so, 9 years.
Something.
Yeah.
9 years, right. What was that like without, I mean, did you know you were anxious? Did people know you were anxious? Or was it just like Quincy's slightly weird or something? How was it
Yeah,
understood?
I think when I was younger, it was definitely more Quincy slightly weird because it's not really something that you think about when someone's that young. It's not that just doesn't come to mind. That's just like, oh, maybe she's just a weird kid,
Mm,
which is like normal. Some kids are just weird. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's fine.
How
And
did
I
it
think
manifest in you, the sort of anxiety? When did you not go to school? Did you, or were you ritualized? What sort of things are going on?
yeah, so I mean, I think school was fine for me since the routine was so consistent.
Okay,
But when it became things that were like sparked and just, oh, you have to go here after school. I didn't like that. I liked to know exactly what was going on, where I was going, when I was going, if my parents would be there. And it was just, I didn't like any of the new.
right.
I think that
Yeah.
was just really scary to me.
Yeah.
And
And how
so
was it
that,
socially? Did you have nice friends at school, or were you avoidant of people?
yeah, no, I definitely had friends. It was just more when things were kind of brought up that I wasn't aware of,
Right.
or
Okay.
where I would be away from my parents for a long time. I think that was a big thing. Those two
Yeah.
new things and being away from my parents were really scary for me.
And what would that
And
do to you in terms of anxiety? How would it manifest?
yeah, so for me personally, I would get like a pretty severe panic attack. So I would cry, I would like my chest would feel super heavy, I would sweat, my fingers would clamp up. Like it was pretty, I think my anxiety was pretty physical.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people can have a panic attack without anyone noticing, which I think is scary within itself because you can't really get a lot of help. But
But panic
it
attacks are
was,
very frightening as well. I mean, it's
yeah, and I think
they
when you're
they you're
younger,
actually terrified when you're having them, aren't you?
yeah. So I think being pretty young and getting something that severe is scary within itself, just
Right.
because
Right.
I mean, it kind of felt regular to me. I think I was used to it. I think that
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
how I thought my body reacted. I didn't think it was unusual until I got a little older and I saw that none of my friends were having this reaction to the things that I was. And that was kind of a wake-up call for me. Because I realized, oh, wait, I don't have to live this way. When I'm told that I need to go to a friend's house after school, but didn't know, most kids don't have any reaction to that. And I don't want to have a reaction to that. So I talked to my parents about it,
Yeah.
and
Did they
I'm
not
sure they
know?
knew.
Did they not know?
I
Or
think they knew. I think they didn't want to push me too much because it was their reality too.
okay.
They just thought, I was a weird but a little different kid.
Yeah.
I'm sure
It's
they
often,
recognized that there was a
I think
bit of
it's
an issue.
often the case, isn't it? Because if it's always been there, as it were, because that's what you're describing, it was sort of always there. It's just who
Yeah.
you are, as opposed to understanding it as a psychological problem. It's just though that's the way. Quincy is, but over time these things get worse, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it just, there was a lot of change going in the middle school. And I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
that could, I don't, new school, new people, new learning environment. And I think that might have made it a little worse, made it a little more evident. So I got into therapy, and for my type of anxiety, then I was in exposure therapy,
Mhm.
which is where you kind of give yourself small doses of what you're scared of and work your way up into the event that you're most scared of.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, it was great for me. It was scary. I hated it. I absolutely hated it
yeah,
because
yeah,
it was just constantly pushing myself,
yeah,
which wasn't great. I'm sure it built a lot of character,
yeah,
taught me how to
yeah,
do
yeah,
hard things, but I I didn't like it then. I like it now because now I'm able to do a lot of things that I wasn't able to do before.
yeah,
But yeah, it changed my life. I was able to kind of live my life as like a normal kid.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and it was great.
How long were you doing that for? How long did it take?
Probably 2 years that time. And then after COVID, I went back to therapy.
Yeah,
Just because that was a hard time for I think a lot of people. And I think I needed to go back. It was what was best for me.
mhm, mhm.
I found myself kind of doing the same thing as before, getting scared of new things, not wanting to leave my room. And I had seen the effect that my therapy had had on me before, and I thought this is something that I want and need to do again to be a normal functioning human.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And how did you discover that work? I mean, most people won't have heard of it talked in that way, but exposure therapy is usually one element of cognitive behavioral work, for example. Um,
Yeah. That was just what the therapist had recommended.
okay.
Um, I think that was just the best path forward, especially since I mean, I wasn't young, but like I wasn't kind of in a point where I could do talk therapy because I didn't know what the issue was.
Yeah. It
Um,
wasn't really an issue because you've described it wasn't
it,
the habit,
yeah, it was,
that's
there
the
was
way.
no like event that brought it on that I could talk about. It was kind of just like, oh, what's the fastest path forward
Yeah.
that
And
I could do to
exposure
help me?
work usually involves teaching somebody techniques for managing their physical reaction, the panic and the fear, to a
Mhm.
triggering event. Is that what happened with you? You sort of like looked at these events that had previously triggered you into a panic attack and you learned gradually to manage your physical responses, right?
Yeah, so it was a mix of learning the coping skills that went along with it. So what worked for me best was box breathing. So that's like
Oh yeah. Yeah.
breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 4 seconds, breathing out. Yeah. Um,
It's a
and so
favorite of the army.
yeah, no, I mean it's definitely proven.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so and then the second part of it was choosing these events that did trigger me and then doing those kind of in more manageable ways. So if it was
That's really brave. Well done.
I mean, it might sound stupid to some people, but it was really hard for me. So being home alone for 15 minutes while my parents were at the store, like it was such small things, but
Not small. They're
working
really,
my way up,
yeah.
um, I was able to, my final goal was to sleep over at a friend's house.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and I mean, I did it, it worked. So yeah, so it really, therapy did a lot for me. And as I got older, I realized that the impact it made on me was so big, and I wanted to allow other people to have that kind of opportunity or access to these coping mechanisms that really helped me. Um, and then, that idea was kind of kept on the back burner for a while
Yeah.
just because I was busy with school and everything.
Well, you
And
suddenly had
then,
access to all aspects of your life that you hadn't had before. Did your
Yes.
family understand what was happening? I mean, your sister and your parents, were they, what was their view on this stuff?
I think after I went to therapy, they too realized that, oh, wow, this is not normal because I mean, they just saw that and then
Yeah,
I was getting constant panic attacks at every single step. So it was just really brought to life through therapy, but also like that was helping me.
yeah,
Um, so I think throughout them, and then they too, they were very supportive throughout the whole process, and my sister was as well. They kind of learn the ways and like learn the coping skills that helped me. And when my sister would do the box breathing with me if I was overwhelmed, and it was
that's
all super, I think, talking to my family about it and having that relationship where I felt comfortable talking about it with them
yeah,
was also super helpful because I had someone to talk to, and I think a lot of times
yeah,
anxiety can be super isolating because you don't see a lot of people around you with anxiety. Like it's not, I think half of it comes from it's just not, a lot of people don't have it to a severe level, which is good, but I think people just also don't talk about it. It's not something that people want to share with each other.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And there's,
which is
isolation and that sort of behavior, people don't see it as a problem, to be honest. And also I think it's often, and this may have happened with you, I don't know, but certainly at the sort of teenage years, we sort of have a story about teenagers, don't we, that they're going to isolate anyway.
definitely.
That's where the way they are. So we don't think that there might be a problem. But certainly as a social animal, when a social animal isolates, that's a real problem.
Hmm.
That's a sign that there is a significant problem going on. And even though I was moody as a teenager, if you just can't bear to be around other people, there's a problem, isn't there? There's got to be. But as you say, people don't think about it in those terms. So
Yeah.
what was it that sort of did motivate you in the end to go and seek help? When did it become clear, if you like, that it was a problem as opposed to just Quincy being a bit odd?
I think it was just when I had the realization that my friends were not having the same reaction
Right.
around things. And it was as I was kind of going into middle school and I didn't want to live that life anymore. And I wanted to kind of start middle school with a clean slate where I could just live and act like other kids. And obviously it took the therapy kind of went into the middle school years, but I think that I don't know. I didn't want to have to live every day with just like being scared.
And what did you know about therapy? Because I think people will be very interested in this because a lot of sort of ideas about therapy are that you have to talk a lot about your childhood and all this sort of stuff. And your therapist said, no, I'm not interested. Here's some techniques to help you, right? That's essentially,
Yeah.
we're going to work on some techniques, which I guess a lot of people don't understand that that's what modern psychotherapy is, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think through therapy, because I've been all around. I've done the exposure therapy, I've done the talk therapy, here's all the problems in my life therapy. And I think what I've learned about that is you can really customize it to where you feel comfortable.
Okay.
I didn't really like talking about, oh, here is my deep dark secret and like
Yeah. Yeah. And
I
it's
I just wasn't I didn't find it
not even
helpful. I didn't
necessary,
think
to be honest. I mean, for most people, it's not even necessary. Even if there is one, it's
yeah, so
generally we
like
want relief from the discomfort, I guess, right?
yeah, so I that wasn't what helped me. What helped me was just learning these coping mechanisms. I thought of my therapist as a personal trainer for my brain.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Lovely.
so let
That's
me
fabulous.
push myself. This is how you can push yourself to make you feel better, and
Fabulous.
these are the skills that will help make that easier.
I love
So
it.
that was
Yeah, that's super.
it was just very like bam, 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 bam. And this is what you need to do to get better. And I mean, that was that was what I needed. I needed someone to tell me what to do, tell me how to do it, and tell me that if I did this, I would get better. And so I think that
Yeah.
that
Had
was really
what
helpful.
thoughts had you had about what therapy was before you started it then?
I was a kid, and I still am, that really liked to research. And so I would
Right.
go to Google all about it because
Yeah.
I think that was also a thing from the anxiety. I wanted to know everything about everything.
Sure.
So I Googled it and I had found that exposure therapy is probably how I would get treated. And that I
Oh,
think that kind of discouraged me from going actually, because it just looked so scary. It was, oh,
yeah.
let me tell you to do every single thing that you're scared of. So I think that stopped me for a little bit, I'll be honest. And
Yeah.
so that was me going into therapy. I was terrified to go to therapy because I knew it was like when you go to the doctor and you're expecting, or I guess when you're younger, and you're expecting to get a shot and you're just like, oh my goodness, I don't want to do that at all. But I went in and I found out that it really was not that scary.
Yeah.
It's not something where you have to do every single thing that you're scared of. You go at your own pace and you do what you're comfortable with. And
Yeah.
I think even after the first session, after I was told that, I wasn't scared anymore.
So the
Um,
therapist explained it, made it manageable. So that,
yeah, and I think that
yeah.
just learning that therapy can be done at your own pace, not their pace, and like whatever you feel comfortable with, then that's what you'll do.
Yeah.
Got
It's,
rid of all those
I
fears.
imagine, I imagine the therapist gave you a lot of knowledge about how your brain
Yeah.
was working and how your body was working, why it was doing these things. What do you remember from that?
I think that, I mean, I was once again a little younger, so we didn't get super into like the anatomy of the brain, but she did tell me that like my brain maybe was wired a little differently.
Okay.
And not everyone has that, but anxiety keeps you safe. And I had always thought of anxiety as something I wanted completely gone from my life.
Right.
Just because
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's not a good feeling.
Yeah, no,
And it was
exactly.
kind of going into hyperdrive, but I think that she explained a lot, and this was a kind of a constant topic of conversation that you need anxiety to keep you safe. It's a primal instinct that people had. Like it's there for you, and that there will always be anxiety. It's just how you learn to live with it.
Yeah,
And so that was kind of what we talked about mostly. And then I kind of wanted to learn more about the sciencey aspect of it. So I took some classes
really. Right.
over the summer just to learn about what it is, why it happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so you found this methodology quite helpful. You also said, I think, that you found medication helpful.
Yeah, so after COVID, my anxiety came back pretty strong, and it had taken me 2 years to find like to kind of fix my anxiety the first time, and I didn't have time for that. And
Yeah,
I
sure.
think at that point I realized that it was not brought on by something. It was just how my brain works. Like there's only so much therapy that can help me, and
Yeah,
it can only take me to a certain point because there's always going to be something in me that kind of rapid fires that anxiety a little more.
sure.
So I talked to my therapist. I got back into therapy, talked to her, and she recommended medication. And I think that really helped me too because I was brought back down to a baseline where I could manage it. And
Yeah,
it's not
no,
to say that
exactly.
it wasn't still there, but like that was what I needed. I needed it brought down to the point where my coping mechanisms would work. And I just wasn't there before without the medication.
A nice way of describing it. And I think one of the things that happened in COVID was that the goalposts have shifted for a lot of people, but certainly anybody who had a previous history of psychological distress had that reactivated during that time.
Mhm.
So anybody. So it makes it's a sensible response to go, okay, this has come back because of those circumstances. Do you mind saying
Yeah.
what medication worked for you? You don't have to, but
Yeah, I think it's Prozac.
okay. Yeah.
Um,
Which
yeah,
is the
or
standard, the original SSRI. So selective
yeah,
serotonin.
so
So people know about that. And you find that helpful? That works for you?
I do. I've been on it ever since. I it takes a little while to find the dose that works for you.
Yeah.
Went up, I went down. It's been a thing. But yeah, and I think a cool thing about the medication is at times, like I worked my way up, did everything. It was like exposure therapy, kind of,
Yeah, 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 yeah,
but with the medication. And so once I did everything I was scared of, I was kind of able to taper it down. And
yeah,
so now, like, I'm at a lower dose. And I think it's just cool that you can customize it to what you need.
yeah. And
Yeah.
people, I think, are afraid of medication, but certainly my experience is for those that it works for, it can be very helpful. And you describe a very dynamic relationship to your medication where you're using it consciously rather than just taking it to numb out.
Yeah. So I think that, and I think my first thought about the medication was, okay, this is going to cure me. And I realized that no, kind of. Like it's still there, but it just takes it to a level that you can deal with it and you can use those skills that you've learned in therapy to manage it.
And you've said that twice, and I think it's worth repeating that what it does is it takes a, because I don't think people understand, and I don't know if this is your experience, but
Mhm.
certainly depression and anxiety as forms of psychological distress are very tiring. They
Yeah,
they take a lot of energy to manage. And often people talk about, and I don't know if this is your experience, that using an appropriate level of medical support means that that level of exhaustion that you get from fighting the distress goes away. You don't have to do that. And then you can manage your tools much better. Does that make sense?
exactly.
Is that how it
Exactly.
works? Yeah. Because otherwise, it feels like you're sort of trying to swim upstream all the time. So every day is even the smallest thing, like got to brush my teeth, got to get up. All of that becomes an effort, as opposed
Mhm.
to then using the tools that you've learned. So sounds like a very successful blend for you.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
very happy that I got on it.
But it's also what I'm interested in as well is that you're very thoughtful about it. You've decided to learn more, what works for you, and that enables you to have the sort of life that you want. So you're very conscious about what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I was a little scared and hesitant to go on medication because I didn't want to have something where I would be reliant on it my whole life.
Sure.
So I wanted to learn more about it before I went on it. And I just wanted to be informed of something that I was taking.
Yeah,
It's just something, and I learned that, oh no, you can go off of it. It doesn't alter your brain. Like it's just something that will help you
yeah. We
for
should
maybe
say
your,
to people who are listening, we're not giving out advice, but these combinations of things do work for people. And also,
yeah, no, this is just what worked for me.
yeah, but the
Yeah.
what's underneath the actual techniques is the way you're thinking about it. And what you're
Hmm.
doing is you're being very conscious about learning about your condition, trying things out, even if they're frightening, but because the evidence tells you this should be able to work. Go and see a professional about it, get advice, try something out, give it a good shot, recognize it works, but it's not a silver bullet, right? Because life happens, pandemics
Yeah.
happen, elections happen, right? So these things happen.
It's a great example.
We have responses to these things, but each time you're being thoughtful rather than catastrophic about
Hmm.
what's going on. But I imagine when you had the second episode of anxiety after the pandemic, you were a little bit like, "Oh, not again."
Yeah, oh, for sure. I recognize the feeling. I recognize, oh, it's coming back. And I just did not.
Right?
I mean, it takes a lot of effort to deal with it. And I
Yeah.
just I didn't want to do it.
No, I'm
Um,
sure. I'm
but I
sure.
think that's a big thing with anxiety. in particular, you always have to keep pushing and you always have to keep pushing yourself or else it'll come back.
Yeah.
Um,
What we
which
talk
I
about with these types of conditions is that one learns skills of managing it. That we're not going to give you a cure, but a good set of tools to manage things. And then whatever tools, everybody's tool bag is slightly different, to be honest.
yeah, for sure.
And I'm sure
Um,
yours will change over time as well, because of life events and things will start working. Um, so specifically, what were the tools that did work for you? Box breathing? Can you remember anything else?
Box breathing was like the biggest thing because I think it was really helpful for me to kind of get back in my body. I mean, the one that isn't really recommended was distraction, but I liked it.
Right.
Um, because that's not like kind of directly dealing with the anxiety, but it worked for me.
Whatever works, it's fine. Yeah.
Exercise, yeah, just keep like exercise to the point where that's all you're thinking about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Keep
Yeah.
going on a
Any
run.
form of exercise like yoga or dance or running, what works?
Running would probably be the biggest thing for me just because it was one of those things where there was no room in my head for anything else. It was just continuously going.
Yeah,
Um, that really, I'd say those were my top three.
great, great. And in terms of social support, were you able to communicate with your network what was going on? What sort of
Yeah.
did you get?
Um, so that came with the therapy. I think I learned that I could talk to people about it. It just
Right,
felt like it
right.
wasn't shame, but it just wasn't something, it just felt so different and it wasn't something I wanted to share. And therapy showed me it was normal. So I was able to talk about it with my family and my friends. And I think that really helped with the isolation aspect of it
Yeah, exactly.
because
And
I was able to talk about it.
often when people, when they first start talking about it, don't know if this was your experience, they're surprised by A, the kindness and generosity of people, and B, everybody then starts saying, well, I've had this and I've had that, and then all these people you thought had their lives sorted, suddenly you go, oh, hang on. A lot of people are having issues, right?
Yeah, and I think that was a big part of why I wrote the book,
Was it?
because sharing my story allowed other people to share theirs, and like I just saw that ripple effect, and I thought that, you know, books are books are stories within themselves, and it's something that you don't have to be there directly to tell a story.
Okay.
It can
But
just be distributed easily.
so
So, yeah.
that now the subject of the book has come up. So, I mean, you couldn't force me to write a book. You could put a gun to my head and threaten my life. I still wouldn't. The idea of writing a book is way beyond. But it's sort of, had you written before, or was it?
I'm with you on that. I absolutely hate writing. Like when I'm assigned an essay
Your
in class,
exposure therapist worked very well with you.
I put off my like it's just not something I enjoy. But I think this would be last summer.
Mhm.
Um, like I said earlier, I'd kind of put the idea of doing something like on a back burner. And I was in Africa and I'd been like having some, I think I was on malaria medication, which I think was triggering my anxiety a lot. I don't know
Yeah,
why.
yeah, it's all weird stuff.
Weird.
It's
Um,
very heavy-handed, that medication, sort of
yeah,
lots of
I don't,
strange
it was
dreams and
strange.
hallucinations and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was having this really strange level of anxiety, just freaking out like it was weird. I'd never had that before. And as I was returning home, I was I'd never been afraid of flying in my life. And
Mhm.
something happened where I was terrified of planes. And as I was walking onto the plane, I was having a panic attack. And the flight attendants and the pilots thought I was sick. And they took me off the plane. They said, you can't fly. And so I was with my mom and I didn't know if I was gonna get back home. I didn't know if I was allowed back on a plane. And I think it just showed me how little understood anxiety and its
Yeah,
symptoms are.
yeah.
Um, and so that was kind of my realization point of, okay, I really do need to do something
Yeah.
because I don't want this to happen to other people. And so that kind of narrative of, okay, I want to make these symptoms more known.
Hmm.
I know that sharing my story and sharing stories enables people to share theirs. And then also a realization of, oh, if I had had something that helped me when I was 5, 6 years old, I would have dealt with it much sooner.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that kind of all led me to wanting to write a children's book. Um, because it was just something that wasn't super in your face. You just learn about the anxiety in it.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to read into the anxiety, you don't have to. It's just there.
You know the
Um,
films Inside Out?
yeah, yes,
They're
something like that.
extraordinary, aren't they? They are extraordinary. The
Yeah, no,
conversations that those films have generated in the all the adults I know who take their kids to see them, and then suddenly their kids are talking about. For people who don't know, Inside Out are literally what we're talking about. The stories of those films are really about feelings and putting feelings into concepts that children can understand so they can communicate them, which is super. And but was that based upon your desire to write a children's book? Was that based upon your experience as a child and not really knowing how to communicate this stuff?
yeah, I think that I just didn't know what it was, and I wanted to give children a vocabulary that they could use with their parents to share it because some kids might be a little odd, but I think a lot of kids have these issues. And through after publishing it, I've just heard stories. People have emailed me and like, oh, my kid has told me that they have these fishy feelings. And they've never talked about it with me before. And like, how do I help them and just stuff like that. And there's been so many stories like that. And I just think that it just shows that having a place where you can have that conversation or allowing a conversation about that
Yeah.
is really helpful, especially with younger kids,
Tell us a
because
little bit about the book then. It's aimed at what, 5-year-olds? Is that right?
yeah, like that kind of probably 5 to 7.
Okay. And tell us the story, the characters in it.
Yeah, I'll tell you the story. Okay, so Frankie is a tiger shark. It's kind of ocean based, and she's 5 years old, and she's having a great day, and she realizes that kindersharken is starting the next day, and she gets really scared.
Right.
And as she's walking into the school the next day, she starts to have a panic attack, and she doesn't really know what that is, but she feels her chest getting heavy and she's sweating and she's crying, and it's a weird feeling. And she talks to her mom about it, and her mom recognizes that it's anxiety
Yeah.
and takes her to a therapy. Um, and she learns that it is anxiety. She learns that word, she learns that it's normal, and she learns the skills to help her deal with that. And that allows her to, you know, do the things she was scared of originally. And I think in the narrative of the book, it shows that the anxiety can come back. It's a You do need to learn how to deal with it. Even after learning the coping mechanisms, she she gets scared, but she uses them and is able to get past it. So I think it's just teaching kids the narrative that if you do have these feelings, there's things that can help,
Yeah.
and you can live a normal life. You're not alone. A lot of people have these feelings
And the
and
other
they're
side
able
of it,
to.
I think, is really interesting because it's also like reading a story with a child is a normal parenting thing that we all do.
Mhm.
And actually, reading these types of stories gives parents the opportunity to ask their children, "Do you have fishy feelings?" And
Yeah, and just
for their kids, then it's no longer frightening, is it? It's just like a game. Yeah, I do, but it's real.
yeah, it's just like, oh, it's just like the character in the book. Like it's just
Right.
not,
Yeah.
it just gives parents the opportunity to facilitate a conversation about it.
That's right.
Um,
Right. And it
yeah.
would be, it's also, I think, there's an important story here, message to get across to people that kids often have very complicated feelings. We have a very sort of simplistic view of children as just very happy, and that's not the truth. It is perfectly normal for kids to have all sorts of complicated and difficult feelings about all sorts of things. Some of them like you because that's just the way your brain is wired. But also, the world itself isn't that much fun at times.
Yeah.
It has to be said, right?
Yeah. And I
And
think kids realize that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And kids as well, and parents should know this. And I wonder if you felt this as well. But kids often, A, because they don't understand it's, they can get help for something. They don't think it's a problem. They're just the way they are. But also, if they think they have a problem, they like to try and protect their parents from it because they're worried
Yeah.
about hurting them. Is that familiar to you as a feeling?
Yeah. And I think it was like, I don't want to be a burden because I know, like,
Yeah.
I mean, at a young age, you kind of realize that like my anxiety was affecting them. Like I didn't like them going away for like a long trip to get like it. I could tell that it was affecting them, and I felt bad about that. I mean, obviously, it was coming out in ways where I couldn't always hide it
Yeah.
from them because I mean, you can't really hide a panic attack.
No.
But I didn't really want to talk about it with them.
Yeah. And also just I'm just thinking about that incident about getting on the plane and not being allowed on and that's such a big burden.
Yeah, for
Not get
sure.
on the flight because of my panic. It's
I
like,
know. It's just,
that
oh
just
my God.
adds so much to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But by then, of course, your family knew and they understood and accepted. It's just I'm thinking about all those kids where that's happening, and maybe people don't know and they haven't accepted, and the
Yeah.
necessity of understanding what this is about. Because otherwise, planes are a classic one, and holidays and loneliness and isolation. These are all classic trigger points. What's the reception been like for your book? I mean, what did your family think you were mad to do this, or were they supportive? And
I mean, they've always been very supportive of
right,
everything I do. And I think that
yeah,
that really helped me kind of I mean, writing a book is a long process and publishing a book is a long
yeah,
process. It took
right, absolutely,
a couple of years.
yeah.
So I think that having that support was super helpful for me. And I think I haven't had any bad reactions to it. I've only had good ones. And I think that the biggest thing for me that has made me really feel good about writing it have been the kind of responses and outreach to me, whether it was through email or at readings, kids coming up to me and saying, "Oh, I have these fishy feelings too," and just like people sharing these stories and saying, "Oh, like this book really helped me," and I
And it's
think that,
really interesting because you discussed that. You said that thing about feeling a bit ashamed and like you're a burden and stuff like that. But actually, by sharing your story now, how much of a burden and how much shame do you feel, given that these types of reactions?
I mean, I feel no shame anymore.
Right,
Because I
right,
realized that, I couldn't really control it and like,
yeah.
but I think people reaching out was really impactful to me because it was kind of a mutualistic thing. It made me feel less alone, and I think I made them feel less alone. And I think
Exactly.
having that
Exactly. Yeah.
exchange is
It's a
really,
really important message to get across, I think, to any young people or children suffering with this stuff. It's because often they will feel like the reaction I'm going to get is going to be negative. But actually, I think usually the reaction we get is quite positive.
hmm
And then we
yeah.
feel like we're just a normal part of the human race again. And
hmm
and that's the most healing thing. So where can people get hold of a copy of your book if they want to read it?
Yeah, so it's on my website, frankiesfishyfeelings.com, or it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble,
Yeah.
Walmart.
So
Yeah.
it's called Frankie's Fishy Feelings. Yeah.
hmm
And you've got a website with the same name.
I
Uh,
do, yes.
but also people could just look on Amazon and find it on it.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Do
Whatever
you
is
do,
easiest.
On your website, do you do talks as well? Do you go into
Yeah,
schools?
on my website, I've tried to make the website a resource as well. I have, my story, and then I also have links to other resources that are available online. So, affordable therapy, or maybe another website with more coping mechanisms. So, just having that be a waypoint for
Great,
other things. So, if the book doesn't work, there's other resources out there too.
great, great. And when are you going to college to study your psychology?
Next year. I'm still in the application process right now, so
You in
a
the
little bit of stress
UCLA, or are
from
you going to
that.
go to another part of the US?
I'm applying everywhere. I hope to stay in LA. I think that would be great, but I, I'm excited. I don't know. Wherever I get in that I'm happy about, I
Well,
will.
I mean, I wish you all the best of luck with that. And clearly, you're going to have a very. Are you going to specialize with kids or work with adults, or don't you know
Yeah,
yet?
I think eventually I will.
Yeah,
Kind of in the first 2 years of college, it's kind of a general psychology degree, and then you can kind of narrow in.
yeah.
So yeah, I hope to get into child psychology, but I think it'll be a good experience to kind of learn all aspects of it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, they
Yeah.
encourage a broad education, these things.
Yeah, for
Uh,
sure.
sort of, even if you know passionately you're going to work with kids, still having that broad background is really useful. Uh,
Definitely.
Look, I wish you all the best with that, and thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for
Seems
having
to
me.
me you're a great example of what can happen when we start that journey of self-knowledge, learning how to manage some of the uncomfortable things in life, and then want to pay it forward. Being of
Mhm.
service is in itself a form of healing, I think.
Definitely.
You're an example of that because you're getting
Yeah,
this feedback from people saying, thank you, it's really helped my life. And that must make you feel good
it
about it.
feels great.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Quincy, it's been wonderful to have you on. You stay there while I say goodbye to people. I would encourage people to go and check out Quincy's website, which is Frankie's, spelled with an I-E, Frankie's Fishy Feelings, and go and check out the book. It sounds delicious. I'm going to get a copy of it myself, and explore some of my own fishy feelings. Um, I always think it's really good to explore feelings and talk about these things. Sounds like a super resource for children and their parents. And I would encourage parents to buy it and sort of have a chat with their kids about it, because the more we are discussing these things, the less distress, the less suffering people have to have, you know. So goodbye for now. Hope you all enjoyed it. And I'll catch you all at the next show. So goodbye for now.